come once again to discuss things.
No, good to go. So, hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Super2. Joining me today is Deadpoolzilla and Vestibixives.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have to say his name backwards to get him back to the fifth dimensional plane?
No, that I just try to say Steve's name differently every single time, which is harder than you'd think.
Honestly, joke's on you. I am the fifth dimension.
So, my favorite moment from Grant Morrison's Batman run is when he's talking to Batmite, and he's like,
yes!
So are you going to tell me, are you a figment of my imagination, or are you actually a magical imp from the fifth dimension? And he goes, the fifth dimension is imagination. And what makes that really awesome is one of the opening monologues of the Twilight Zone is saying there's a fifth dimension, the dimension of imagination.
And even better than that, it's just, you can't, say he's wrong. He could be talking about a very factual statement about the state of the universe. There's no way to know. Technically speaking, the fifth dimension's probably imagination.
I'm sure there are some string theory theorists out there who are viciously typing at their keyboard right now.
Good. Explain that shit to someone who will understand it, because it ain't me.
Yep. Anyway, Deadpoolzilla picked our character discussion for this episode, as he did with last episode. So, Deadpoolzilla, who are we talking about this time?
Still there?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, I guess we are discussing the dual faces of Dr. Jekyll and his evil alter ego, Mr. Hyde.
Yeah. So let me ask this. Have either of you read Jekyll and Hyde?
Yes. Yeah. Numerous
times. I am a firm no, so I'm glad we got two people here that can actually know what they're talking
70 pages.
about.
It doesn't take long.
Okay. You guys actually know
what
you're
did you
talking
say?
about.
That book 70 pages. It's not very long.
You pretty much get the gist of the story by 20 pages in.
It's not a complicated thing.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad, because I'm going to let Steve take the reins on this one then, and I will interject when I feel I have something of value to say.
So, Dr. Jekyll and Hyde's interesting in relation to the book versus the way we do it later, because the book's title is The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and the way that story is framed, it's almost Twilight Zone-esque of here is this story of this really weird thing that happened in this one really small town, and we don't really do that, and you can't really do that anywhere else, so we just kind of turned Jekyll and Hyde into a monster as opposed to more of a mythical moral tale as the book sort of frames it. Did anyone at all give any shits whatsoever about the new Mummy movie?
I still haven't seen it.
No one has. No one cares.
I watched
awful.
it. It's pretty shit.
Yeah, it's kind of garbage, but and you know they're gonna disown it again when Bride of Frankenstein comes out, and then that will do awful, and they'll disown that too, just like Dracula Untold. But anyway,
yeah.
But that movie tries to make him even more so just a traditional movie monster thing. It's a weird thing. Jekyll and Hyde is one of those characters where he was one thing, then his reputation became something else, to the point where we just made him his reputation as opposed to who he was.
Mm-hmm.
Frankenstein's a little bit like this.
Yeah, and it's funny, because the thing that I'm trying to think, outside of random little things where Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde show up, such as League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the movie, not the comics, because I still haven't read those, like, I think the most exposure I've had to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is the mixed bag of interesting and then terrible that was the BBC original series Jekyll.
That first 2 or 3 episodes were amazing.
And then
the weird government conspiracy bullshit.
Yeah, it's like a metaphor. It's like a microcosm of Stephen Moffat's Doctor Who run.
Oh, that is so sad, but so true. Oh, that shit. Like, first 3 episodes were really... It's like a roller coaster where it's going up and up. And like, oh, this is really cool. Then it went straight down. It's like... No, it's like Splash Mountain.
No, because Splash Mountain's still fun. It is like you got on a roller coaster that you thought was going to be really fun, and then, like, right at the precipice, they were like, oh, shit, we didn't finish this. And then you literally go straight down. 90-degree angle drop, no catch.
No learning curve there. See, that was funny. I almost thought you were going to go in the exact opposite tonal direction and talk about Jekyll and Hyde in the Looney Tunes cartoons.
Oh my god, I forgot about that.
Because that was my first time ever seeing that character in anything.
That was mine as... Well, actually, no. My first experience to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde came from the Page Master.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, that's fair. Yeah.
I should mention, just real quick, plug for a video that's like 4 years old. Bill and I at one point did a review of Stephen Moffat's Jekyll, if anyone wants to go hunt that down.
I'm curious to watch that. I haven't seen that since it first came out.
Wasn't it on I saw it on Netflix.
Me too.
Yeah, same.
So Jekyll was, like, the thing that was good about Jekyll, right, was the performance and just how, like, intricately crafted everything was and how dramatic a change that performance was. Then there were, like, other things that were just, like, kind of ridiculous about that. Like, what was it? I remember, like, at one point he comes back from a night out as Hyde, and he, like, walked all the way there, and he says to the assistant lady, I couldn't find my car keys. And she's like, did you check your left pocket? And then he does, and she's like, you gotta remember that he's left-handed. And so, like, he walked all the way home because he didn't think he had his car keys. But I'm like, okay, come on, who the fuck can't find their car keys and only checks one pocket? Get the fuck out of here with that noise.
They're not in the right pocket? Shit, this is over.
Yep.
I never thought of that.
Oh no, they're not in my right pocket. This is over.
Your whole day's ruined now.
Where did I put my stride gum?
Yeah, that is something that always bugged the show, because, like, I do not always carry my pocket or my keys in one pocket and my cell phone in the other. It alternates.
Okay, no, I do, but even then, I can tell when it's not there.
Right. Anyway. So, like, that show was just interesting because of the performance, but no, I don't have a ton of exposure to this character. Specifically with what you're talking about, Steve, where it's like he's a very different character in the source material compared to how everything portrays him.
Well, and so this is a good time to plug this, just because it's the kind of music I listen to. But so there's a band called Ice Nine Kills, and they have an album out like a year ago now called Every Trick in the Book. And basically every song is a retelling of a famous story or horror movie or something in that vein. The latest one they just released is on The Shining, and it's amazing. But they have one song called Me, Myself, and Hyde. And part of what's really interesting about the good songs on that album is that they're never just like vague reputations of the thing they're talking about. They're always very particular interpretations. So if you listen to the song on The Shining, it's a very particular interpretation of that movie. And it's the same thing with the Jekyll and Hyde song, where that song, when Dr. Jekyll's talking, it's just plain singing. And then when Mr. Hyde transforms, it's screaming. And then the screaming and the singing start blending in with each other in a similar way to the way they do in the book. And so that's awesome. And part of what I like about that song is that it's not just like two sides at war with each other. It is lyrically very much about like the whole emotional relativism of the sort of like whole emotional relativism of society, and sort of like how, depending on your mood, certain things are right and certain things are wrong, and how bizarrely disorienting that makes the world for you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, because, like, I guess I'm trying to nail an example of that down, then.
Yeah, I mean, it's all there in the book. Like, the book does a very interesting thing with, like, descriptions of space and stuff. And so, like, when Jekyll's there, everything's kind of bland, and it's very, like, aristocratic, and he's sort of like a very organized man, but by virtue of making things very organized, everything's very bland, and everything's just very, very normal. In contrast, when Hyde shows up, everything gets so much more, like, visceral. Because he's angry about everything, everything has a character.
Okay.
Yeah. I think why the character of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the character of that appeals to me is that it's kind of the same thing of why I love the Hulk so much and, you know, werewolves and the whole transformation thing is because in an odd way you're having this, like, how do I describe this? Like this absolution that, you know, there is a side of you that can do everything you wanted to do that held you back. There is this side that is just giving you this absolution that, you know, whether, you know, you've been, you know, talked down to or insulted or, you know, beaten down by society or groups of people, there you can just unleash this other, just more animalistic side to, you know, kind of absolve you of that kind of hatred.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of what's so interesting about that classically is that it's sort of like, it's not you that's the murderous monster, it's this weird repression, and it sort of falls in the same line as something like Dracula, which is in the same century as this, and the sort of same sort of genre of Gothic romanticism, where, like, the idea of everything in society repressing you on some level is really just the inversion of, it's not that it's repressed, it's that it's overly exposed, and so by virtue of not talking about it, you let it boil down and become this monstrous thing that takes you over. And that's really cool, and that's the thing, because we talked about the Wolfman, and the Wolfman has a very similar Hulk thing, and so does Jekyll and Hyde, and I feel like that sort of paradigm between the Wolfman and Jekyll and Hyde really foundationally rests on that notion of, like, who gets to be blamed for how good or bad of a person you are? Is it you, or is it the world around you? And I think obviously the answer is the world around you, but when you internalize it so much, what happens?
And see, I disagree on that point. I think that, like, most things, it's like a mix. I think, like, on some level, people are responsible for their own agency in the world. You know, the whole existentialism, you have a damn choice on some level, right?
Well, I mean, you have a choice insofar as your agency is an extension of the world you live in.
Yeah, that's right. And so, like, the way in which the world gives itself to you and the way in which you take it are a give and take. It is a relationship. It's not just... You're not just a beaker being filled. You contribute, you give back what you get, right?
Yeah.
And so I find that really interesting as we talk about this, like, interpersonal dynamic and these beasts of man, this little demon on your shoulder or whatever. And I think Jekyll and Hyde, at least on some level, is one of the initial attempts to kind of bring that to the forefront, and like really show someone wrestling with that kind of urge versus repression, ego versus id dynamic.
Yeah.
In fiction, because, like, I don't see a lot of things where it's like struggling with these two opposing parts of the head very much. Like, a lot of historical fiction, when we talk about, like, you know, the Greek dramas and stuff, they don't seem to be about, you know, quote unquote man dealing with his animalistic tendencies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there, and I think there's particularly in the book as opposed to what we see in other places, because this is sort of what I mean about the reputation becoming the character, where it's sort of become where Jekyll's a person and Hyde's a person, and they switch back and forth. And in the book, it's more along the lines of like, at what point is Dr. Jekyll just projecting this name, Mr. Hyde, to cover up things he's doing? Or at what point is Mr. Hyde projecting things in order to fit in with the rest of the world as Mr. Jekyll? Like, it's not... It is kind of two separate people, but the bigger ambiguity is, well, what if it's just the same person who doesn't know how to live with himself? Whereas, like, in everything else, it's more like distinctly, no, you change into a monster, and that what that monster does has nothing to do with the other person. They're like Bruce Banner and the Hulk. They are two literally separate personalities, and I don't like that as much.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, and that's the thing is, like, I think in the popular version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, that he is kind of just the Hulk. Like, he's Victorian Hulk, right?
Yeah.
Whereas what you're describing with the book, it's much more... it's much more psychological. Like, you could make the argument that it's more like a story about dissociative identity disorder as opposed to a monster story.
Yeah, and I mean, the book it's interesting, it's short, there are, like, very obvious things of, like, well, clearly here he's like a different, he looks more monstrous and stuff, but because it's told from the perspective of people describing these events and journal entries and stuff, a lot of that is sort of like fluff, and reading the book itself, it starts to become a process of, like, uncovering, well, wait a second, is in what he's telling you right now, is he lying to make himself sound more innocent, kind of thing? Because it's a case, you know, it's like a Twilight Zone thing.
Mm-hmm.
What I also love about the book is that it doesn't absolutely condemn Hyde. Like, it does give him like you said, Steve. It is very much like his story as much as Jekyll's, and it's a very gray area for the two.
Yeah, there's a point towards the end where, like, Dr. Jekyll is slowly losing, like, his... it gets to the point where, like, over time, he has to stay as Hyde longer than he can stay as Dr. Jekyll. And you start reading the journals, and the journals when you read the journal, it makes you wonder, well, wait, hang on a second. If he's staying as Mr. Hyde longer, then he shouldn't be able to write this. So is he just projecting? Is he just acting like Mr. Hyde and trying to act like it's someone else doing this? It's kind of interesting. It's a thing where, like, you can only sort of read it. You can't really see it.
Yeah. You could also interpret it that it could be Mr. Hyde wanting to kill himself. In a way. Because, like you said, it could be just Hyde projecting Jekyll, and he's already lost the battle, but there's, like, a shred, like, oh my god, I can't live with myself if I'm Hyde forever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is part of why I like that song as much as I do, is because it really goes into that sort of back and forth, and at what point... Because what the song does is it opens with Jekyll talking, then fades into Hyde talking, and they have a conversation, and at some point, as opposed to the two arguing, they both literally start saying the same thing, and they both talk at the same time.
That sounds really impressive from, like, an audio layering perspective, if nothing else.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like my kind of, like, metalcore music, so I don't know how much you'll like it, but I think you'll appreciate it.
Okay, I can see that.
There's actually, like, another... I know there's been several Jekyll and Hyde songs, but the one that comes to me is Ice Dirt's Jekyll and Hyde from their horror show album.
I've never listened to that.
It's more power metal than metalcore.
That makes sense. Okay. I know Judas Priest has a Jekyll and Hyde song, but I haven't heard that in forever.
What is your favorite Jekyll and Hyde metal song? Leave a comment below. Steve Baxy's going to do a top 10 list of Jekyll and Hyde metal songs.
I'm sure there are lots. It's just a really cool thing for that scene. I'm also not the biggest fan of... And the book has this in description, but, like, again, it's the unreliable narrator thing. I'm not the biggest fan of, like, Jekyll and Hyde physically looking that different from each other. Like, in the Jekyll TV show, the subtlety was part of what made it work.
Yeah, it's seriously just all on the actor, right? For giving a really amazing physical performance. Like, physical and vocal performance when he was playing Hyde in that show. He did a great job.
Yeah, no, he's genuinely playing two separate characters at the same time. It's great.
Yeah. I don't know, like, it depends on what you're doing. If you're doing something where it's supposed to be more psychological than supernatural, obviously, but if you're doing, like, the whole Victorian-era Hulk, fuck it, why not make it a massive physical transformation?
Yeah.
So, like, we've talked a lot about the original Jekyll and Hyde, but we haven't talked about, like, the more modern perception of him then. And so I think you guys would say it's less interesting, and I'd probably tend to agree just based on what I've heard about the book here. But why do you think that has become the more prevalent version?
I think partly
it's easier.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say, it's much easier to grasp for general audiences.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's basically comes down to, like, how do you visualize that novel, and you do it by creating two separate people. I think the first Jekyll and Hyde movie won an Academy Award for Best Actor. So, like, it's certainly a very different thing to do in live action on a technical level, and so you just kind of lean into that difference. It's not like he's bad in the movies or in other stuff. Like, he's fine. It's just... It's a story that lends itself to being read before it's a story that lends itself to being seen. And I mean, Bears of Karloff does a really cool Jekyll and Hyde in the Albert Costello movie, and that's fun. And you get cool stuff out of it here and there. Like, Nichols a second ago mentioned Pagemaster, and that's fun. And then Russell Crowe, as awful as that movie is, he's a fine choice for that character. But, like... It's just a limitation of the form. Like, if you got Darren Aronofsky to make a Jekyll and Hyde movie, it might be something more interesting for me.
That'd actually be kind of perfect, really.
Wouldn't it, though? Because, like, Mother is the weirdest fucking shit, but if that's not the guy to do Jekyll and Hyde.
Exactly.
Still don't know anything about that movie.
That's the weird thing about it, is that, like, I feel like whatever. I know what it's about, but then at the same time, like, there's no way it's this simple.
Yeah, it's whatever. So, see, I think the reason that the like monstrous Hyde has caught on so much isn't just because it's easier to understand. I think it's because it's visually something we're drawn to, the idea of someone transforming into a beast.
Yeah.
And to give it the connotation of these are your animalistic desires manifesting themselves, all that stuff. This is someone removed from morality who's just a bastard and it's like physically forming itself. I think there's like a real appeal to that, not just because it's easier to understand, but because it is more relatable than someone who is so repressed that pretending to be someone else as a funnel for that repression and that kind of behavior is more appealing. I think that there's something more just relatable about the idea of not being able to control yourself, control those base urges, and the fear of, like, what if that was just given form? I think that might just be a more generally relatable idea.
There's potentially a cool aesthetics thing there of, like, why does bad mean ugly and why does good mean beautiful?
Right.
Yeah. I would like to see, someone in any form of media, whether it be comic or movie or whatever, like to have, like, a Jekyll that is more at peace with Hyde and more like he's just it's like kind of letting a dog off the leash in a way. I don't know. I would like to just see, like, instead of him fighting with Hyde, like, he is just kind of like, all right, well, if I don't let him out, he's going to be like a rabid dog, so might as well let him have his fun.
It might be interesting to just bring up, like, the whole relationship between Jekyll and Hyde and the idea of werewolves and the Wolfman. Because I was gonna say, well, that'd be the perfect thing to do on a show like Buffy. But then I remembered, well, wait a second, Oz kind of did that, except he was a werewolf. And so how different is that really?
I think, like, with Hyde, you have someone who is still more a man.
Yeah.
Than like the werewolf transformation, whereas like the werewolf transformation is literal animalistic, whereas the transformation into Hyde, the way it's portrayed in popular culture, seems to be more about like the morally reprehensible thing. Like I just remember, Steve always makes fun of me for liking this movie, but I remember Van Helsing when Mr. Hyde's in the beginning of that, and he's just like smoking and drinking. And he's, like, talking in, like, just really foul language and all this stuff. I
He's
tend
like
to
a
think...
giant ape-looking dude.
Yeah, he's like 6 men, 4 women, 3 children, 2 goats, and a big mass of poultry.
Yeah.
He's like an angry Shrek.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that particular way in which he's portrayed it's very much like, you've all been at the goddamn... Alright, fine. Perfect example. I won't put this on you. I'll put it all on me. I will shoulder this burden. So I went to Subway today. I got my food. I ordered 4 cookies in the drive-thru. I got home. I only had 2 cookies. And I was mad. And the restaurant's like right down the street from me. I can go back there at not too much inconvenience and complain about this, or a lot worse if I just completely let myself go. You've all felt that. You've all felt that, like, God fucking damn it, what if I should do something about this? And I feel like Mr. Hyde is that, no, I'm gonna go fucking ram my car through that goddamn restaurant because they fucked up my cookies. That's what I'm gonna do right now, and they're going to pay. I feel like Hyde kind of embodies that as opposed to, like, strictly animalistic, bestial kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I could see that. It's an interesting notion of, like, in order to make Mr. Hyde more evil, we make him uglier and more animalistic. And so the most logical extreme of that would be like something like a werewolf. So I feel like they're related, at least in some way, even if they're not the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair enough.
I know there used to be a BBC show, like, that was really short-lived. It came out like a few years ago. That was a modern Jekyll and Hyde thing that I never saw, but apparently it was awful.
They tried it again after Jekyll?
Yep.
What the hell?
If I remember right, part of the reason it got canceled is because people said it was basically Doctor Who.
Oh, wow. Huh.
So,
Strange.
Yeah, there was a whole thing there. I might look into that just because I'm in the mood to do that now.
Yeah, you go ahead, Steve. No one will stop you.
Fair.
Except for your baser urges, I suppose. And your need to control and repress them.
I'd really like to see a new Jekyll and Hyde movie. Like, I don't care about this dark universe because both movies so far have not given me much to work with. But
I mean, Untold's better than from what I've heard about The Mummy.
Oh no, it is most certainly better. But like, I'm not going to go out of my way to watch that movie again if I don't have to.
Fair enough.
So like, a Jekyll and Hyde movie, particularly in this weird new age of horror where we're doing stuff like It Follows and The Babadook and like that whole sort of like more surrealist kind of horror, it makes perfect sense to do a more literal adaptation.
It'd be cool. I don't know how you visualize it super well, but it'd be neat to see someone try.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are ways to do it. It's just it hasn't happened yet. So.
Mm-hmm. Fair point.
On the same note, I'd love to see a new Invisible Man movie, but like, I doubt that's happening.
Especially not with Johnny Depp.
Fuck Johnny.
Okay. Well, I'm about out of things to say. Deadpoolzilla, did you have anything else you wanted to bring up with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde?
Yeah, I'm sorry for stepping out for a moment. I guess the only thing to say is that I think this character has just a ton of longevity, and again, it's public domain, so Steve, you might get a movie, Darren Aronofsky Hyde movie at some point.
I fucking love that. It would just be called Doctor, all lowercase exclamation point.
Okay, here's something we can talk about real quick. Do you guys feel that Dr. Jekyll should be kept in the Victorian age, or do you like the idea of bringing him to the modern day?
I think what the cool thing is that he's one of the few characters that you could honestly do in Victorian or present day, because he's a very psychological character, and people are always prodding deeper and deeper into the mind. So you could, work that character, or rather characters, tomato, into modern day and really play with some really fun stuff with that. But if you how do you guys feel?
I mean, I honestly, I'm sort of of the same mind. Where the thing about the character is that depending on the context, the metaphor changes. So I prefer it in more 19th century Gothic style, just because I think there's something really interesting to be said about how we think our history is, as opposed to what was actually happening in that way. And doing it in a modern time could be cool, and you could do a lot of interesting stuff about, hell, you could make internet trolling a Jekyll and Hyde metaphor if you wanted to. It's not hard.
I was about to say that. I was about to say, well, I don't know if someone would exist with that level of repression today, because they could probably just start up a Twitter account and go bug the fuck out of some people.
Well, exactly. And I mean, you can play with that distinction of they're like that online, but they're not like that in person, and go back to the book of well, how much of that is the same thing?
That could be really interesting. You could, honestly, that is a great premise for a for a low budget film.
A low budget horror film, maybe.
Yeah, if it's just someone in their house, in their day-to-day life, that could work. Oh shit, that could work really, really well. If it's just a day-to-day guy, you wouldn't need any kind of budget for that. You just would need a good, compelling actor and a damn good script. Fuck.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
I'd love to see that happen. I prefer it in that setting just because I like that setting overall, but the metaphor is really simple. You could do tons with it.
Mm-hmm. I tend to agree. I was gonna say I prefer to keep in the Victoria era, but now with this idea, I'm like, ooh, let's go.
Yeah. At any point in time, if a person is at war with themselves, then you have a Jekyll and Hyde story. So.
All right. Recommended things for Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
I'll cheat. The book's already there. Okay.
I'll cheat and I'll say the first 3 episodes of Jekyll. Now you guys have to come up with the good recommendations.
The song Me, Myself, and Hyde.
I would say the 31 film.
Which one's the 31 film? Is that the one with the Academy Award?
That's the one with the Academy Award, yeah.
Okay, cool.
I would also say, just for the hell of it, because this is cheesy Hammer, Dr. Jekyll and Mrs. Hyde.
Oh, I love that movie.
I was gonna say Page Master, but he's only in it for 2 scenes. What's another good one?
The Abbott and Costello one.
Yeah, the Abbott. With Boris Karloff. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, those would be my top picks.
All right, awesome. Thanks, guys.
No problem.
That will do it for this week's episode of Geeky Gentlemen. Everyone, thank you very much for watching. Next week we are going to be on Halloween, if I'm doing the math correctly in my head. Next week will be Halloween, so there will be a special episode posted, but Steve and I have discussed it, and we're going to do another character analysis episode, so you're going to get 2 episodes of Geeky Gentlemen on Halloween, and that one will be about what character, Steve?
Wait, have we decided this already?
I thought we did. Did you want to change your mind?
Did we? Because when we talked about it, we were talking about, Pennywise, weren't we?
No, we decided on Frankenstein because he's right in between horror and history.
I completely forgot this conversation had happened. Frankenstein. Yes, Frankenstein. Thank you for telling me what I thought.
You're welcome.
Yes, we were talking about Frankenstein.
I will gladly be your daily reminder thing. It's you're going to text me remind me to get milk. I'm just going to text you back
Ian,
an hour later, get milk.
You're basically Steve's Igor.
Yes.
Did your hump switch spots?
What hump?
What?
I love that movie so much. It's gonna be hard not to just be like, Young Frankenstein, the end.
Yeah, totally. All right, everyone, thanks very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I'm the Exile.
I am the Don Juan of Comic-Con.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.
Ah!